I asked myself this question the other day that I'm about to ask you, and it brought me so much clarity. And it literally defined what I naturally do that endlessly brings me success. So, what I want to ask you is what do you naturally do that you might not be aware of that endlessly brings you success? And I'll ask that one more time and really, really focus on this question is what do you naturally do that you might not be aware of that endlessly brings you success? So for me personally, I'll share mine so maybe it can create some ideation, but it's like I will endlessly procrastinate what I'm supposed to be doing, and I will aimlessly create whatever it is that calls me, and it will naturally bring me to success every time. And this has been endless in my life. It has showed up so many times, and at every major milestone, this has been the process. And I felt myself in this shift right now where I'm like, I kind of feel like I'm on the in-betweens right now. I don't exactly know where I'm going, but I'm starting to have an idea because when I realize I've been, building an app called Eden that stands for Energy, Design, Environment, and Navigation. And when I was building this, I had no want to or desire. I was just playing around with AI. And then I was like, this is pretty cool. This is solving my problems. And then I rolled it out and I was like, wow, this is kind of like gluing everything together. And I'm like, oh boy, this is dope, right? But it's if you endlessly look at my story, it's like when I was in nursing school, I used to procrastinate studying for a test and I'd create music. At the time, a buddy gave me Logic Pro. I've never learned how to read or write music. I've never taken a music class besides playing the recorder and some hot cross buns. But that would, that would be a muse for me. And I would create songs, upload them to SoundCloud, had no want or desire, but was like, this is fun. And then had multiple songs to get maximum downloads. And I was like, maybe I should do something in a creative field. And then nursing showed up, I finished school and then I got into that. And as a night shift nurse, which I hated night shift, it was so boring, but very, very beneficial on my journey, is like, I wanted to build a business. So I created RN Fitness and I started by building a website on Wix. And I never built a website before. I'd never started a business. And then I'd find out like, because at the time I was into fitness and nursing, and I was like, man, nurses are so unhealthy. They need to get healthy. And residents, all my friends who were residents were super unhealthy. And then I found out in building that market, they're so burned out, they don't have time for their own health and wellness. They're too busy taking care of others, right? Like it's the pattern. And I would endlessly like fill that business, but it really started to open me up. And then when I was in nurse practitioner school, I'd procrastinate studying by building a business, and then I bought a camera at the time and I'd shoot photography to not have to study, and then later I'd buy a drone and the rest is history, right? And then in doing client work, for instance, when I was working on like Premier League edit, some VSLs and some landers, I would work on the client stuff and then I'd get bored. I'd procrastinate it by building my personal brand, and then I built a personal brand, and it's like this continually unfolds. So in your own life, where I can really help guide you here is like, look backwards. The future doesn't exist. Well, it could exist if we're intuitive to it, right? Like, but endlessly don't look this way into the future. That's the trap. That's where anxiety, stress, pressure, all that shit shows up. And if you look backwards, you can actually see more. And that's like, I'll give you a little clue of Eden. That is what Eden is built off, is this pattern recognition, because my brain will naturally do it and I can predict forward very clearly at a highly calculated rate because I know the pattern. And it's like patterns exist all around us, right? Summer, fall, winter, spring, the years, the sun comes up, the moon, you got daylight savings, summer solstice, babies are born over 9 months. Like everything has a pattern to it. And if you ever have, been in a toxic relationship, like you cut off that one, you'll open up another one if you don't create changes, right? So it's endlessly, these patterns are all around us. And if your brain's attuned to it, or even if it's not, it's like when you bring awareness to it, it's called your reticular activating system. It'll start to place it in your reality so that you can see it. And that's why I asked the question. And if you don't know the answer, don't try to fake that you know the answer. Be very blunt and say, I don't know, but I'm going to get curious. Because when you state you don't know and you get curious, it creates your mind to focus attention in that area. It's really cool, right? But if you look back at your past and you look at all the milestones, you're going to continually do something that transitions you from this to the next thing, right? It's like whether it's a relationship, maybe you end relationships the same way, and that's been the pattern. And if you're back in that pattern, you could almost guess that you're probably going to end another relationship soon, right? Or if it's like a career, if you're like me and you've had a lot of careers, hopefully you're not like me and done a ton of careers. It's not my will, but it's definitely what my soul signed up for. Is like at each time I was getting bored and didn't like what I was doing, or just like reach the end of that journey. I think that's a more fair way to say it is I would endlessly procrastinate. I would create space for something else. I wouldn't know what I was doing, or I wouldn't have a deadline or a destination. It was just something to play with. And I think that's so important there too, is like, what do you naturally play with or procrastinate with, right? And then it's like endlessly along my journey that I shared with you, when that shows up, it's time to transition. And sitting in a transition right now, I was just talking to a buddy earlier today and I was like, man, I don't really know what I'm doing, but also like I'm not trying to define it right now because endlessly I'll procrastinate, I'll play with something, I'll create something, and it's the next thing in my life, right? And it's like, and I was talking to him about Eden, and I was just like, yeah, it's this pattern I know in my life. What do you think I should do to start to pull all this together? And that was our conversation. And then I was like, dude, I got to drop this to my YouTube community today because this is gold in my life. But endlessly, if you look at all those milestones in your life for relationships, work, I think those are the two big ones. Relationship and work kind of mirror each other too in patterns in the subconscious. But and even mentioning the subconscious here is like, even though you know the subconscious has the most negative rap for self-sabotaging, right? But at the core of it, when you were born, your subconscious was, primed with what you're meant to do in this lifetime. And then you have conditioning for it on top of that, which is others, imposing their belief on you, and you can accept it and it becomes a belief, which later becomes a limiting belief or out of alignment, or you can deny it, right? And even somebody who's less than 27, 25 years old, if you're watching this video, ask yourself how many of your beliefs that you've created, that you actually created from lived experiences versus what people told you to believe. Because that's what conditioning is, right? There's a really simple thing on conditioning. But even though how heavily conditioned we can be, and if you're a projector, like it's the hardest thing to clear, right? But even in having all that conditioning, that subconscious autopilot, which is really what the subconscious is, it's our autopilot that can take over, and when it's wired correctly, it endlessly leads us to success, right? It'll endlessly lead us to where we need to go. But even if stuff's blocking it, it still can override your willpower and your consciousness, or at least in my reality. Maybe you can drop that below if that's your reality too. But I believe it's like that part of us that's wired to make sure that we carry out our mission. And I believe in free will and all that other stuff, but it's like, I also believe that there's milestones in life. It's almost like, I wish I had my whiteboard, but it's like we have this milestone and this milestone, and then free will is what we do between. And if you ever heard of like overnight success, like there are some stories that people actually didn't do the 10 years and they did something dope and it blew up, right? And it's like, that's one of those milestones to me in my reality, because my reality went from nursing one day, full moon, blood moon, February 2nd, 2018, and literally that timeline closed and I was an entrepreneur the next day, and then self-taught video, and it's all this stuff. So it's like, that's where my belief comes from, just for some back information, I guess. But it's like, we endlessly can choose positive or negative, energizing or draining. And sometimes life does put us in tough containers to prepare us for what's next. That's where I feel like I'm at right now too. But even though all those things can happen, it's like these things are going to happen in our lives. And if we can spot that thing that we do that opens the door and gets us there, we can start to lean into it a little bit more, right? It's like, for instance, this gets a little tricky in getting specifics to somebody watching this video, but in your career, a question I'll ask people at events, this is what I was trying to get to, is like, how did you end up where you're at right now? And if it's a job you hate, even better. It's like, how did you get into that job? Because people at events, and I'll get to talking to them here, it's like, they'll be like, I just don't know how to get into it. And I'll endlessly blow people's mind with this, and I love to. It's fun. And I'll be like, well, how did you get to where you're at now? And they're like, I don't know. It just kind of happened. And I'll be like, cool. What about before that? What'd you do? And they're like, so and such, and or this one career. And I'll be like, cool. How'd you get there? And they're like, it's typically somebody showed up, I accidentally did something that ended up working, or poof, it appeared in front of me and I chose it, right? So if you know that, it's like, stop trying to figure out what's next. It's just pulling attention away from this moment. But if you're going to look anywhere from the moment, look backwards, identify that pattern. What is something you naturally do that you might not be aware of that endlessly leads you to success? Because even in opening that question and saying, like, maybe if you don't know, like, be honest and I don't know, and get curious about it. Curiosity opens us up to so much. and then stuff lands in front of us. Or if you're into like, I think this is neuroscience, it's like the reticular activating system. If you were to focus on a Tesla, you will endlessly see Teslas. And it's a really good hack in like gratitude and all this other stuff. But if you don't know something, you can prime your brain to start to look out for it, and it'll endlessly put it in your reality. And when you got it, say got it, because otherwise it'll keep pouring in, right? But if you can look backwards in your life and see the patterns, and you have to look at them honestly and openly, you're going to identify something that you might not be aware of that you typically do that leads you to success. And it's like another good thing I'd share here is like Dan Sullivan's book, The Who Not the How, is profound, right? But something that he shared in there that really opened me up to this concept was procrastination is the soul's wisdom. And endlessly, everything I'd procrastinate was my soul's wisdom leading me to the next door, right? And it's like in building all this AI stuff, like everybody's on an AI wave and I wasn't. And then one day it just hit me. I was like, I want to build this. And then I was like, I don't even know what I'm building. So I played with it. And then once I played with it and I saw the results and I was like, oh my gosh, this is cool. And I built it. And then magically somebody rolled it out for me and it's about ready for beta testing, which I'd love all you guys to test it out. So I'm trying to figure out how to fit it into the market next and not really figure it out, just like waiting for something to show up that is like, or seeing all the signs in my reality that is like, this is what you should do with it. Because I even talked with somebody, I'll share this with you guys here because I feel like we're building a connection through these videos is, it's like, do I want to charge for it or not? I haven't charged for stuff in the past and people didn't see the value in it. So that's something I'm considering. But also I think this is a tool I'd love everybody to have. And I'm like, how can I create a price point or something that brings benefit and equals out the playing field of like giving and receiving, and also not having to create the value, but people pay attention to the value, right? So that's what I'm working on now is like how to roll this out. And it's going to start with beta testing. So if you're interested, shoot me an email or drop a comment below and I'll reach out. But it's like, whenever you do this stuff, it's like naturally they'll land in front of us and it's following those signs. And it's like, too, it's like in my life, when I do this, I'm like, man, that door is really wide open. We should probably go through it. And it's like when you're healing and going through journeys early on, you get burned. Like that's how you learn lessons and gain wisdom. But at the point that the lessons stop, and the door's wide open, like go through it. It's opening for a reason, right? It's not delusional, it's not fantasy. It is only if you keep it in your head and don't act on it. But as soon as doors open and signs lead you to a road that has less resistance and it's easy for you and excited about it, it tends to bring you gifts, right? But as a whole, I think I'm gonna end this here is like, ask yourself that question. What is something I naturally do that I might not be aware of that endlessly brings me success? Because once you identify what that pattern is, you can start to look for it. Don't recreate it into the future, but if you're in a transition and you don't know where you're going next, notice what you're doing when you find that pattern, and then notice in the past where that thing that you've naturally done has led you, and it's probably led you to every milestone in your life. And that's seriously all I wanted to share today with y'all. So thank you so much for being here. Be on the lookout for Eden in the descriptions. I'll probably drop it soon. I'm working on fine-tuning it. You guys want to join my school community, Enoch? It's free. It's down below. It's very metaphysics driven to, unlock your authenticity of who you are. And what else is there? I have the Sexy Moron is down there. I have so many free items in the description box below that I'm really excited to share with you. So if you love my content, you like my mindset, or if I create curiosity in you that opens you up to a different way of thinking, you're definitely in the right spot. And I'd love to share these resources with you. A lot of them are what I've been covering in these topics, but also I love talking to camera. I love, sharing things that really help me create clarity in my life so that hopefully you can be clear, you can move faster, you can go through stuff with less pain, anxiety, and stress and pressure, and you can have a whole lot more fun as you build your life forward too. Peace out, y'all. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next video.